Hey guys, Carlson here to wrap up Chapter 5 with you over the integument. We're going to start with Section 6 that covers hair, which is composed of dead keratinized cells that have been pushed to the skin surface. Hair, along with your follicles, sebaceous and sweat glands, and nails, are considered accessory structures to the integument. Our hairs are going to project above the skin almost everywhere except the soles of your feet, palms of your hands, sides of your fingers and toes, your lips, and then certain portions of your external genital organs. The follicles are actually little organs that produce our non-living hair, and we're going to talk about both of their structures. I'll refer to the diagrams as well. The follicles are going to project deep into the dermis and usually the hypodermis. Walls contain all cell layers that are found in the epidermis, all those strata that we talked about. The base epithelium forms a cap, over the hair papilla, which is a peg of connective tissue with capillaries and nerves. You can see that here. The hair is formed by epithelial stem cells in the hair matrix. You can see that here in this actual image or in the diagram. And as division continues, cells are pushed up to lengthen the hair and they keratinize eventually and will die. The hair shaft, which is up in this region here, is going to consist of 3 dead keratinized layers of cells. You have your cuticle, or your surface, which is kind of shingle-like. The cortex, which is the underlying layer, and it's labeled in here. And then your medulla is your core layer. Now, distinguishing between the root and the shaft, basically it occurs halfway to the skin surface, and you can see this boundary line right here, and it marks, that's just marking where the hair root and the hair shaft separate. Also, your cuticle and your cortex are going to be a thick, hard keratin layer, while your medulla is going to be a soft keratin to make your hair flexible. All right, a little bit more about your hair. As far as growth is concerned, the cycle bases on activity levels of your hair follicles. Generally, hair on the scalp grows for about 2 to 5 years at a rate of about 0.3 millimeters a day. It may then become inactive in about the same comparable time frame. New growth cycles equal new hair that is formed being pushed, and then the old will get to the surface to be shed eventually. And the rate versus the cycle is what results in the variation of our hair growth if our hair remains uncut. Function, there's about 2.5 million hairs all over our body. 500,000 of those are on our scalp to protect from UV light, cushion light blows, and insulating benefits for our skull. Guarding nostrils and ears. These hairs would prevent foreign particle entry. It's a similar function that our eyelashes have for our eyes. Sensory nerve fibers at the follicle bases, they can feel movement, so any sensitivity, we can feel our hair being moved. For example, if a mosquito were to fly on our head, we can feel it, maybe smack it away before it, bites us. And then the erector pili muscle is going to help with the movement of our skin, and that is going to move our hair shaft to result in things like goosebumps, and that helps maintain our body temperature. Finally, color is just a reflection of the pigment in our bodies that it results from genetics, and that's from different forms of melanin. Hormonal and environmental factors can change in certain conditions, and age is actually going to cause a lack of pigment being produced, which is why we get gray or white hair as we get older. Now, 5.7 focuses on our glands, the sebaceous and sweat glands. They are the exocrine glands that are found in our skin. So those are the 2 types included in the integument system. Sebaceous is also known as oil glands. They discharge oily lipid secretions into hair follicles or skin. And they're released through holocrine secretions, which is when those cells will rupture and die after the secretion. Sweat glands are also known as sudoriferous glands, and there are 2 types, the apocrine or the merocrine, which are also known as the eccrine glands. So, sebaceous versus sweat. The erector pili muscle elevates hair to squeeze the gland of the sebaceous and force out secretions. We call these secretions sebum, which lubricate the hair and the skin and inhibit growth of bacteria. Sebaceous follicles are large glands. They discharge sebum directly onto the skin, and they're primarily found on your face, back, chest, nipples, and external genitalia. They're sensitive to changes in sex hormones, so they accelerate during puberty. They could cause acne. This is when you have blocked sebaceous ducts caused by buildup of secretions, and that could result in inflammation, which is normally what we see as a pimple. Now, this does create a fertile bacterial environment, which can also make the acne more severe. Now, sweat is also into 2 types. You have your apocrine. They secrete products into hair follicles in the armpit, around the nipples, and in the pubic region. The name is apocrine because it was thought to be a gland that's secreted by the apocrine method, which is a shedding of portions of the cytoplasm, but it's really a merocrine secretion, which is through exocytosis, but they still kept the name. Now, apocrine secretions are a sticky, cloudy, and potentially odorous due to bacteria form of sweat. They can be a form of communication in some mammals. Antiperspirants are going to decrease the amount of sweat while by kind of blocking up the pores, and then deodorants mask it. Now, your barocrine or your eccrine glands, they discharge secretions onto the skin's surface. They're far more numerous. There's about 2 to 5 million in your palms and your soles of your feet. Sweat is about 90% water with an electrolyte mixture, organic nutrients, and waste products like urea. This type of secretion is going to help maintain body temperature by cooling because it happens all over your body, and it can also dilute harmful chemicals on your skin. There are also a couple more special glands. We have the mammary glands that are found in the breast. They're apocrine-like and secrete milk. We have the ceruminous glands. They're found in the passageway of external ear, and secretions will combine with sebaceous glands to form earwax. Now, here are diagrams of your sweat glands. You can see the apocrine here, sweat glands, and here's a duct going into the hair follicle. And you have your merocrine examples here. Notice they're in the dermis, while the apocrine are in the dermis and hypodermis. And we know it's the hypodermis here because of this fatty tissue. We also have another picture here of your sebaceous gland, kind of connecting off the follicle to release that oily substance. All right, moving on to section 8, which covers our nails. And our nails are keratinized epidermal cells. They protect our dorsal tips of our fingers and toes. They also limit the distortion of our digits when subjected to stress, like when we grasp objects. They have a lot of tiny structures like our nail body, which is a dense mass of dead keratinized cells. It's recessed below the level of surrounding epithelium. The nail bed is covered by the body, and it's epidermis. Nail root is where our production takes place. We also have our cuticle, which is a portion of our stratum corneum, and it's kind of folded over. And the lunula is that pale crescent area that we see due to lack of underlying blood vessels or them being obscured, because that pink color is normally from those blood vessels. All right, section 9 is just going to talk about how we repair after our integument gets injured. And the integument can respond directly and independently to local influences or stimuli, and that doesn't have to involve the nervous or endocrine systems. So subjection to mechanical stress can result in the basale layer dividing more rapidly, resulting in the thickness of the epithelium to increase. But more dramatic example is when we have a severe injury to the skin. Now, this division of rapidly growing skin into a thicker layer is what we know as calluses. So anything that we use very frequently, and again, some kind of mechanical stress, you usually form calluses in those areas. But talking about the injury in more detail and the repair of those sites, basically we can regenerate effectively due to those stem cells. It replaces the lost epidermal and dermal cells. It can be slow if there is a large surface involved, and it can also result in infection and fluid loss. The speed and effectiveness is going to depend on the wound severity. We would call it an incision if it was a slender straight cut, which may heal more quickly, and abrasion if it's a scrape, and this involves a greater area. Basically, a combination of blood clots, fibroblasts, and an extensive capillary network is called the granulation tissue, and this is occurring during certain phases of skin repair. So the first part of skin repair is where we have bleeding at the site immediately, and mast cells in the region trigger an inflammatory response. 2, after several hours, a scab is going to form. And these are cells of the stratum basale. They're migrating along the edges of the wound. Phagocytic cells are removing debris. Clotting is occurring around the edges of the affected area, partially isolating the region. Now, our scab is a blood clot itself. It temporarily restores the epidermal integrity and restricts bacterial entry. Steps 3 and 4. It was about 1 week after injury. The scab has been undermined by epidermal cells. Okay, and we have these fibroblasts that help with that activity. There's still phagocytic activity around the site slightly, but it's almost ended, and the fibrin clot is breaking up. And then after several weeks, the scab has been shed and the epidermis is complete. A shallow depression marks the injury site, and we basically have scar tissue. And that's an inflexible, fibrous, non-cellular tissue. We could also form keloid scars, which are thickened areas of scar tissue covered by a shiny, smooth epidermal surface. This is harmless. Some cultures even intentionally do this as a form of decoration. Burns now, they're relatively common due to exposure to heat, radiation, electrical shock, or strong chemical agents. The severity of the burn depends on the depth of penetration and the total affected area. The larger the area, the greater the effect. And the most common classification is by depth of penetration of the skin. So we have a common classification table: first degree, second degree, and third degree. First degree is going to appear inflamed and tender. Second degree, we're going to have blisters, it's going to be very painful. Third degree is literally charred, no cessation, all due to damage to sensory nerves. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of copy down some details of this table. Lastly, 510 effects of aging that include dermal thinning, wrinkling, and reduced melanocyte activity. So some of the major components are skin injuries and infections become more common, as well sensitivity of an immune system is reduced, our muscles become weaker, and bone strength decreases. Our sensitivity to sun exposure increases, skin becomes dry and scaly due to glandular production decreasing. Our hair thins and changes color, again because of that lack of melanocyte activity, and sagging and wrinkling occur as well. Would it be a bad idea to write down some details about these from your textbook as well? But otherwise, we are 100% done with the Chapter 5 video lectures, and I'll see you guys next time.